I have a statement to read. This meeting is being recorded as required by the 2020 Acts of Assembly, Chapter 1283, Item 4.0.01.g. A copy of the recording will be posted on the SHEV website. And with that, we'll call the meeting of the Academic Affairs Committee to order. Also, I'll remind council members as we have items to take action on today, we'll do a roll call vote for each of those, just as a reminder. And our first item is to approve the minutes of the January 11th Academic Affairs Committee meeting. Does anyone have any changes to that? Those minutes? If not, will someone make a motion that we approve them?
I move that we approve them.
Second.
The minutes. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. It's been moved and seconded. Alex.
Aye.
Rosa.
Aye.
Marianne.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. So the minutes have passed. Okay. We have a couple of action items up. Joe, we had talked about possibly grouping a couple of them together. Do you still want to do that?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so the first item we have on public institutions is Lord Fairfax Community College, but also we have an action item on teacher education at public institutions where the institutions can seek to have teacher preparation programs. Joe thought it'd be good to group those just to help us move along. And Joe, do you have anything else you'd like to share on those two items?
Well, I've just run through them very quickly, Mr. Chair, and explain to committee members that since both items are putting forward new degree programs for approval, it's appropriate to group them together. The Virginia Tech teacher ed programs are an item that has been done in a slightly different manner, and so we've been doing the write-ups for those differently for the past couple of years. This is probably the last time we'll do this particular kind of item, and so that's why they're presented in two different items. But since both of them put forth programs for approval, I suggest just running through them together. And I'll do that now if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir, please.
Thank you. So the first item in 2C on the Academic Affairs Committee agenda is an Associate of Science and Engineering from Lord Fairfax Community College. This is a transfer program. It's been motivated by increased interest in the AS in Science engineering specialization that Lord Fairfax has had for a number of years. Data in the write-up points out that the enrollment has nearly doubled in the last 5 years. I would note that the program exceeds our normal allotment of a maximum of 63 credits for an associate degree program. This is not an unusual feature of programs in engineering. They typically have more than the norm, and so we thought it appropriate to recommend this for approval nevertheless. The program has received letters of support from Lord Fairfax's two major transfer destinations for associate degrees in engineering, Virginia Tech and George Mason. And so that is one program that we would recommend. The next two are from Virginia Tech, and they are both bachelor's degrees in education. So if you note from the write-up, the first degree from Tech is a BSED in elementary education, and the second degree program is a BAED or BSED in secondary education. And this, by the way, is something that we do with some periodic occurrence for our institutions, is to authorize them to award two different degree types for the same program. The idea is that the particular qualifications will differ slightly depending on the emphasis of the program. So it's not unusual to have a BA and a BS in economics, or a BAED and a BSED in education. So that is a normal feature. It's treated by us as a unitary degree program nevertheless. These two programs from Virginia Tech are the result of 2018 legislation that for the first time allowed Virginia universities to offer undergraduate degrees in education as teacher preparation programs. Prior to that 2018 legislation, the norm in Virginia had been governed by State Board of Education policy, which mandated that only in special circumstances, essentially special education and physical education, could an undergraduate degree in education be awarded as the credential that leads to licensure as a teacher. All the other endorsements and areas of teacher education had to be done via an undergraduate degree in a subject matter discipline or in liberal studies. And so the General Assembly changed all of that, and the State Board has since changed its policy to accord with the General Assembly bill. And this, by the way, was done to help address the teacher shortage issue. It was felt by superintendents of school districts that if their prospective teachers could get an undergraduate degree in teacher education to prepare them as teachers, that would increase the flow and increase their ability to hire teacher candidates. So what this proposal from Tech is the result of the third year of us affording public institutions a facilitated process for this kind of degree program. We started it in 2018, 2019 after the bill was first passed. That time we had a fair number of institutions jump on that bandwagon. We had 7 institutions put forward 25 new programs. Then the next year, 19 and 20, we had, I think it was 4 institutions do 7. And now 2021, we only had 1 taker, and that was Virginia Tech, and they've done these 2 programs. So I think we'll probably end that facilitated pathway. But the result is the agenda item that you have before you. And if you would, please note in the table following the write-up, you can see both the endorsement areas and the projected increase in teacher production at Virginia Tech in those endorsements as a result of this program. So this is something we asked the institutions to do, to include in their submission in the enrollment planning, was what the net difference in teacher production would be as a result of going to the undergraduate level for licensure. And you can see that they, 22 at the elementary education program and 33 per year as a result of the secondary education program. And that's actually broken out by the different endorsements. So that is the Virginia Tech teacher education program. And so what staff is recommending to the committee is approval of the 2 resolutions associated with these agenda items that occur in the agenda book on pages 13 and 15.
Council members, does anyone have any questions or comments about either the Lord Fairfax Community College Associates in Engineering or either of the Virginia Tech teacher prep programs? If there's no discussion, will someone make a motion that we accept both 1C and 1D?
Mr. Chairman,
So moved.
either way, I can second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I'll start with you, Alex.
Aye.
Rosa,
Aye.
Mary Ann, and I vote aye as well. All right, thanks. That has passed. Next up, we have 1E, which is George Mason's establishment of the College of Engineering and Computing, which is a major strategic initiative, one that rose to the level of having to be brought before council. Joe, will you share a little bit more with us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So what the committee has before it is a recommendation to approve a new College of Engineering and Computing at George Mason University. This is in accord with council's duty to approve new departments, schools, colleges, branches, divisions, and extensions. I think I got all of the different entities in there in the Code of Virginia. SHED policy normally divides this kind of activity into, quote, simple organizational changes and complex organizational changes. And we do the simple changes at the staff level, things like changing the name of the Department of Biology, from biology to biological sciences, things like that, which typically are minor internal management changes. When a change rises to a level where it's more than just tweaking the internal management measures, and in particular, if it results in a large, ambitious new venture, then it's deemed to be a complex organizational change, and it comes to council for approval. And so this college, although because it involves rearranging already existing resources, doesn't result in a large net increase in the fiscal arrangements within engineering and computing science at George Mason. Nevertheless, it's a large overall unit with a very large budget and some of the largest programs on campus. We deemed it to fall into the complex category, which is why it's coming to council today. The agenda item includes extracts from the proposal submitted from the institution to illustrate the various aspects of the requested action. And broadly construed, the way I would characterize this is that the new college will really elevate the overall disciplines of engineering and computer science, as well as, in particular, computer science itself, which will, in a subsequent action, come forth as a school, whereas previously it had only been a department. So basically, what you're going to have is a school of engineering with the Department of Computer Science getting transformed into a college of engineering and computer science, where computer science is its own school. And obviously, there are many things going into changes of that sort. The tremendous growth in computing and not unrelatedly the move of Amazon to locate its second HQ in Northern Virginia. The resolution for this is on page 18 of the agenda book, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair. And I note there should be a couple of representatives of George Mason on as well, in case council members would like to direct any questions to them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Council members, any thoughts, questions? Did the folks from George Mason want to speak at all? Not necessary. All right.
I'm unmuting them.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let's see. Liza Durant, you should be unmuted now, and Kenneth Ball.
Yes, hi, this is Ken Ball. I don't have anything in particular to add. Thank you, Joe. That was quite a nice summary. I think that captures everything. But if you do have any questions, I'd certainly be happy to answer them.
Don't appear that we do. I think it's an appropriate move, and we will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the resolution, and I just wanted to say it made it easy. The presentation, the materials made it very easy to move ahead. It's a great idea.
Agreed. Is there a second?
A second.
All right. Alex, how do you vote?
Aye.
Rosa?
Aye.
Mary Ann?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. That motion passes. Very good. Good luck with the new college. Next, we have action on private post-secondary institution certification. This is Briggs and Stratton. And this is mostly an organizational change, Joe, a change to the organizational structure.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. This one, well, yes. The basic idea here is that Briggs and Stratton has to get a new certification from council because it's undergone a, quote, change of ownership. And the change of ownership is is an artifact of Virginia code, which states that when the for-profit status of a school changes, that counts as a change of ownership. And so Bryant Stratton has gone from being a for-profit school to being a nonprofit one, so they've got to come back and get certified again.
Yep, and I see that there's someone from Bryant and Stratton on as well. If you guys want to add any comment?
Jody may need to unmute him.
Yes, I know. Hang on. Okay.
Thank you, members of the council. First, I want to say that Joe's group did a thorough job of reviewing this, and I really appreciate the amount of time that his people went through, being very thorough with that. This is a very unique situation. Bryant Stratton College has been in existence since 1854. The college has been in the family for 165 years. The gentleman who is was the controlling shareholder and his wife were essentially at the end of the line in their family. And now, under a very unusual circumstance, they're donating the educational assets of the college to a not-for-profit entity that is now a college. And this is how they would like to see the college continue its existence for another 165 years. It's a very unusual circumstance. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for adding that. We appreciate that extra bit of color to the story.
And Mr. Chair, I would just point out that that was Francis Felser, who is the president of Bryant and Stratton.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments from council members? If not, we have a motion, please.
I'll move that. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. By roll call, Alex,
Aye.
Rosa,
Aye.
Marianne,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Moving on. Action on proposed final enrollment agreement. And this is sort of, as Joe and I discussed, a consumer protection measure, Joe, as you described it. Can you talk a little bit more about the item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this one stems from a General Assembly bill that was passed in 2017 with assistance from Chev. That bill established as a requirement that regulated post-secondary schools in Virginia must have an enrollment agreement with their students before enrollment. And the idea here is to provide clarity of information for students as consumers, and also to get on the books what the certain basic information about the terms of enrollment. Things like what the cost of the program is going to be, whether the credits are transferable, what the school's grievance policy is, and what the terms are under which a student might cancel either before or after enrollment and receive a refund of monies they've paid. That was deemed, those topics were deemed as important consumer protections that we didn't quite have enough leverage to enforce with existing regulation. And so the General Assembly passed that bill in 2017. We've been going through the regulatory process to put the formal regulation in place ever since then. It's had a couple of fits and starts because there's a couple of different points we were advised by the Department of Planning and Budget to try to get student feedback on the bill. And so we tried at two separate points to do that. That actually proved to be more difficult than we imagined. Not that we couldn't get student emails, but it was difficult to get students to respond to it. So that's the reason for it, the thing being passed in 2017 and finally coming to the point where we can put the final regulation into the the state process now in early 2021. The text of the regulation is in an appendix to the agenda item. If you note from that appendix, you'll see that there's a section of underlined text that is about 1.5 pages. That is the actual new enrollment agreement regulation. And you'll see that it specifies certain topics that need to be in these enrollment agreements, but they have to be signed by a school representative and the student. And there, at different points, there's specific language that needs to be present. And school compliance with the regulation will now become part of the certification application, as well as compliance audits that are conducted by staff in our private post-secondary education office. So that is the agenda item that we prepared for the Academic Affairs Committee, and you can see the resolution on page 28 in the agenda book, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And Mr. Chair, I would also point out that Ms. Sandra Freeman, who is our new Director of Private Post-Secondary Education, is also available to answer questions if you or committee members have any. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add, when Joe and I were going over this last week, I shared with him that the night before, I just heard someone tell their story. Now, this story was 50 years ago, but they told their story of going 4 years of school, getting all the grades, passing all the classes, and then being told, hey, we're not going to let you graduate. You'll have to wait till next year. So, there were actually occasions where these kinds of agreements needed to be in place. And again, that was 50 years ago, but you never know. So it's good to have them in place. Council members, any questions of Joe or of other staff? Yes, Alex.
Yes, you partially answered my question right there. And I'd like to put you a little bit on the spot, Joe, just to understand what it was that led to this. I understand that there's a resolution from the General Assembly, but clearly that was under certain circumstances. And what you've presented to us is clearly quite detailed and based on a lot of back and forth with attorneys and determining what's necessary. But I'd also like to hear from you not only what is the problem that existed to be solved, and then is this a reasonable approach in solving it?
Thank you, Ms. Arriaga. Yeah, the basic issue, frankly, is predatory practices from unscrupulous schools. That's the big problem. Mr. Ampey mentioned about someone coming to the end of their education being told they can't graduate. We have had instances like that in recent times. For certain kinds of schools, especially ones that are regulated by boards like nursing, they have to have pass rates on certain exams. And we found that there were schools that were actually instituting policies where they would give the students a diagnostic exam, and then if they determined they were unlikely to pass the formal nursing licensure exam, they would hold them back and not let them graduate, even though they had otherwise fulfilled all of the academic credentials. So that they're, and so now that's not the only kind of thing. There are also other kinds of things like when students enroll in a program at, say, a proprietary school or a nationally accredited school, and they think that if they finish that program and transfer to a public four-year institution or a nonprofit school, that they will easily be able to transfer their credits. And then when they go to transfer, they find out that that's not easy at all. And staff in PPE had, for a time, been trying to require schools to put these kinds of topics into an enrollment agreement, but it actually, even though they were trying to do that because it seemed like the right thing to do, that particular thing wasn't actually in regulation, so they got pushback from schools. And so when we were approached, and I forget which General Assembly member it was, but we were approached by one of the General Assembly members, 4 or 5 years ago, who wanted to do a consumer protection bill. And Sylvia Rosa Casanova, who was our PPE director at the time, identified this as the thing that we would offer them, specifically to address those kinds of consumer transparency issues for these types of schools. And I say this, I feel a little bit reluctant to characterize it so baldly as I have, but frankly, that is the issue. It's a minority of schools that would engage in these sorts of practices, but they were there, and we lacked the regulatory leverage to force them to do this. Is this going to solve all of the predatory practices? Almost certainly not. Nothing ever does. But it will be a very good tool, both because the students will now be obliged to confront a lot of information at the beginning that they otherwise might not. They'll be signing off on it. Particular people at the schools will be signing off on it. And when we find instances of non-compliance, we'll have bald proof of what's going on. So it'll be a good regulatory tool. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Any other questions or thoughts? If not, will someone make a motion that we adopt a new resolution?
I moved.
Second.
Second.
All right. Our final roll call vote of the day. Alex.
Aye.
Rosa.
Aye.
Marianne.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just real quickly on that, I didn't have any questions, so I didn't want to take up too much time, but I commend everybody at Chev for working on this. I remember when the bill went through, I think it was Kathleen Murphy. I'm not sure it was, but I think it was. And there were a lot of.
That's right.
Yeah. The discussion, I mean, you sort of know the situations are out there, but the discussions were really alarming and upsetting. And I commend you also for trying to get student input, not once, but twice. I can't imagine this certainly wasn't anything I was thinking of as a person about to enroll in college. So it does not surprise me that you did not receive feedback on that, but you're doing good work for future students nonetheless. So thank you for enduring what was an unusually long regulatory process. Good job.
All right, next up is just a review of the program announcements from public institutions. Council members may recall, we sort of tweaked our process recently where we sort of get a sneak peek of the program changes and announcements that might be coming down the pike. And we have a few here in your agenda book. There's JMU, 2 from UVA, 1 from VCU, and 1 from VSU. That are and there's the summary of the programs and a little table there. And then of course we have all the background support in our agenda pack as well. Is there some discussion on any of these programs? Or Joe, anything else you want to share? Again, these will come back before us later, but this is just an opportunity for us to share any thoughts we might.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just say that, again, as our chairman has described, the purpose is to let council members see what's coming so they can raise any questions, concerns, interest in any of these actions before we receive the actual proposal. We would normally receive the full proposal by June 1st, although I'd like, after any discussion has occurred, Mr. Chair, I'd like to throw up a slide and just provide some additional information to the committee. And then I would also point out that we have institutional representatives who are present who can answer any questions as well if council members would like to pose them. Thank you.
All right, Joe, you said you have a slide you want to share?
Yes, but I'd like to let the discussion go where it's going to go, and then I'll do my thing at the end, if that's okay.
Okay. Council members, is there some discussion on any of the programs presented?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, and Joe, you may know the answer to that. I hate for somebody to have to find somebody to unmute at UVA for this. Obviously, we've talked a lot about their School of Data Science, so I expected to see some of these, so that makes sense to me. I was just surprised that they did not have a Bachelor of Oh, maybe, do they have a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and they've added a Bachelor of Arts? Is that what's happening here? I just can't imagine they didn't have
Yeah,
okay. I
right.
was like, they must have a
That-
bachelor's
that is-
degree in computer science already. Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
I'm
That is
reading
it.
more critically. Thank you.
Yes.
Any discussion of any of the other programs? And again, they'll come back before us in a more formal fashion later this year. All right.
And Mr. Chair, if I might also point out one other thing, the way the current process is designed is that these program announcements are put into the agenda book for this council meeting. There is a then approximate 30-day period during which other institutions have the opportunity to provide any commentary on them. And so if there are concerns about duplication or other advice that an institution has been offering a similar program, they can weigh in with that. And then the proposing institution will have to respond to that feedback when they submit the full proposal. And so that's another feature of this process, which is a little bit more transparency amongst the institutions as well.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks. All right. Well, and I guess now, if you don't mind, I'll just share my one thing here that I want to let the committee know about. And I hope that I can do this successfully. I think, no, that's the wrong document. Sorry. Let me try this again. Wait a second. Let me close. I'm sorry. Got to get better at doing this. Here it is. Okay. There it is. Okay, good. So you should see on the screen a document that just says timeline, and then there are a couple of bulleted subheaders under that. And if you notice that top section there says October approval timeline with deadlines. So this gives what the timeline is for the program announcements and then the program proposals. Institutions submit the program announcement at the beginning of March. We put it in the March council agenda. Then they have a deadline of June 1 to submit the actual program proposal. And then we review that in time for a final action at the October council meeting. And of course, we interact with them in between June 1 and October and give them feedback, and they adjust their, what they want to do with the proposal in the meantime. I just wanted to let the committee know that given our experience with this process over the last year, we're entertaining the idea of eliminating that June 1 deadline, so that they certainly can submit it before June 1, and if they do, the program ought to be on the schedule for action in October or before. But we would like to remove that deadline so that the institution can submit the proposal whenever it's ready between March and October. So we think that will improve the institution's ability to produce a quality proposal, and will make the timeline of working on these things be a little bit easier both for us and for them. So we know, unless the committee, unless council members feel that there's something objectionable about doing that, we're going to remove that deadline of June 1 and just let the institution submit it whenever they're able, anytime between essentially mid-April and October. Thank you.
And Joe, I'd assume if it got too close to the October meeting, it would just get pushed to the next.
Right. I mean, obviously, if they get it to us in the middle of the summer or sometime in the fall, the October agenda action is very possibly not going to happen.
Right.
But it might be. But that'll be up to them. They can manage their own work and make their own decisions about whether they care about getting on in October.
Right. Council, amenable? Is that amenable to everyone?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
And that sounds great. Good recommendation. Would you eliminate the December 15th deadline also?
I would, but first I would like us to see what happens.
Okay.
Assuming that this goes okay, then yes, by all means.
Okay.
But this is all a little experimental. But yeah, I would assume we would do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. In that case, we'll move on to an update on graduate outcome survey by Dr. Ellis. And Dr. Ellis, you have come before us many times here in recent times. I'm sure you're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel on this survey. I believe last check, I have maybe 13,000 responses thus far.
Yes, we are a little bit over 13,000 now in total.
Good deal.
And yes, the light, we do see the light at the end of the tunnel. We do not believe it's an oncoming locomotive, as the old joke goes. And we're all excited about that, as I'm sure you all are too.
Absolutely. Well, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. I do have a PowerPoint. I'm going to start the presentation mode, and hopefully that's showing on your screens now. You're seeing...
No, not yet.
No? Sorry. I should probably share, shouldn't I? That would be helpful. Okay. This is not my usual software here. Does that look any better?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's up there now.
Thanks for your patience. I know we're supposed to be able to talk without PowerPoints, but some of us are slower learners than others. Okay. Anyway, Mr. Chairman and folks in the committee, thanks very much for your time. I will keep it brief. I know, although this agenda is moving along quite rapidly, which is, I think, good for everyone. But you may recall we've had this project plan in stages, taken a long time to get to where we are. I think that care has reflected well in the response rate we're getting and the lack of any serious problems that we're encountering administering this survey. But we are approaching June 30th, which is the end date of the contract, very quickly. And so we are essentially working in the last three pieces of this project plan simultaneously. We're wrapping up data collection in the production stage. Of course, we have syntax that we used for the pilot survey, and we're working with that to try to get up on the analysis for this. And we're writing a few pieces of the report. The methods has been kept up to date in writing along as we've gone. So we're really kind of crunching here to get to the final delivery date of June 30th. You may recall that we ended up with really two data collection efforts running side by side. The probability sample is the survey that we've really talked about for most of the time. That's the survey with the letters that went out and also email invitations to people in that sample who had email addresses. Most of the people did not have emails, but we're trying to use those emails where we have them. So that was a sample of a little over 50,000 graduates, and sort of a traditional probability sample with some strata in there that we controlled for various proportions in sampling. We also took everyone else who was in the population of interest who had an email address who didn't make it into the probability sample, and we put them into an email-only supplement. They only get invitations by email, no paper through the mail, no booklets, and there were about 52,000 of those. So we're aiming across the two of those in total for about 15,000 responses. And where we are right now, these numbers are as of a couple of days ago. 11,700 completions from the probability sample, looking for 13,000 roughly from that sample. That plan originally had 4 mailings that we were going to do to people. We have dropped the 4th mailing. The mail service is running really slowly, and our vendor turnaround time in between mailings is not quite as quick as we would like it, but we should still be on track for those 13,000 completions. That was our original estimate of what we would do from this sample. And on the email only sample size, we have 1,300 completions so far and counting, and we're aiming for 2,000 there. So the project has been slow, and I'll blame COVID because it actually can be blamed, even though COVID is a convenient excuse these days. But we are on track for June 30th. This is a look at the modified contact schedule. You see what we've done so far down through March 15th. And today or tomorrow, we think tomorrow, the final batch of letters, about 30,000 letters are going to go out with the final reminders to people we haven't heard from yet from the probability sample side. We earlier today sent emails out to the remaining portion of the email only sample that we hadn't contacted yet. We've been working those people in sub waves to help control our final expenses on gift cards that we give people when they complete the survey. And then we'll have a couple email reminders to the folks with emails in the probability sample. That's contact 7 and 8 there. We plan to close data collection by April 30th. We have to allow time for some of the paper survey booklets to travel out and back. I've avoided saying anything about preliminary percentages or data because once those numbers go somewhere up on a screen, they tend to travel. But in general, so far, we're not seeing anything unexpected with the data. We had the benefit of the pilot survey to give us some sense of numbers we might be seeing. We are working on analysis. It's been a pretty solid percentage. A little more than 2/3 have been agreeing to have their survey data linked to the administrative data that Chev has available to it. That's one of the unique features of this study, is that linkage. And about half of the respondents to this survey say they would be interested in participating in a separate survey panel later on if there was interest in doing that. We have more than 40,000 open-ended comments from the survey that we are reviewing and assigning some summary codes to that will help us summarize that information. Finishing the coding of the open ends is probably one of the biggest challenges we have with the timeline, but we're working on that. So the next steps, we want to get the returned paper survey booklets from mailing number 3, which is now the final mailing for the probability sample. We want to send our final email reminders, as you saw on the contact schedule earlier. We did launch the final email only sample wave earlier today, so that's done. We've got a couple of newly minted PhDs that we've hired part-time on staff, and they're helping us already very effectively. We will fulfill some of the survey booklet mailings that we're getting on postcards. We gave people postcards to request a survey booklet. We'll do that in-house to speed up that process. And we'll wait the data file, complete the analysis, and reports and files delivered by June 30th. That is the update. It's busy, it's crunching, but we're excited to be this far along. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Busy, busy, busy.
Yeah. Any questions? I'm happy to take them or follow-ups by email, however people want.
Council members, any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you been successful in disaggregating data by various demographics?
Yeah, all the variables are in there. So we have demographics either from self-reports on the survey or from the original data from Chev. The question about disaggregating demographics will always come down to, how many people did you start with in those categories? And then, of course, how many do you have in your data set to say anything about? So in terms of the logistics of it, yeah, that's not an issue. We devised the sample by the discipline groups that Chev has in their administrative data. So that's about 7 or 8 discipline groups. And we designed the sample to try to be able to say things about discipline groups in total for the whole population. And in a number of cases, we're going to have, we would anticipate, enough responses from individual institutions to say things about those broader discipline groups at the institutions where those discipline groups are fairly common. I mean, there are some institutions that tend to really, as you know, focus on 2 or 3 disciplines. And if you look for students in other disciplines, you're not going to find them at that institution, but you'll find them at another institution. So it really will depend on how many how many graduates were in categories to begin with. But we've tried to make it as possible to look at discipline groups by institution wherever we had enough numbers to start with. It's going to be a case-by-case basis depending on what people really want to look at. Sorry, that may have been a more, I don't know, detailed or rambling answer than you were looking for.
No, thank you very much. That's helpful to understand sort of the challenges and sort of the limitations and also the information that's available to you. And Mr. Chairman, it reminds me of the conversation we had earlier today in terms of our capacity to really look at information and analysis. So thank you very much for that, Dr. Ellis.
Sure.
Any other questions for Dr. Ellis while we have him? If not, thank you, sir. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you, likewise.
Our last agenda item is Joe's report on staff and staff activities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This will be brief. Let me first point out, I alluded to this earlier, that we have concluded the search for our Director of Private Post-Secondary Education and identified Ms. Sandra Freeman, who has been at Chev for the last 15 years. So she's moved up through the ranks to assume that important job. She will now be the chief regulator of private post-secondary education in Virginia and leader of the PPE staff at Chev. So congratulations to Sandra, and looking forward to working with her for the rest of my career. And let me also point out, I think I neglected to mention this in January. It may not have been fully finalized by then, but we've actually rehired Sylvia Rosa Casanova, who was Sandra's predecessor. Sylvia, Ms. Atkins will appreciate this. Sylvia retired in June and then realized she didn't have enough to do. And so she's coming back to help us. And that is very timely and a very welcome development for us, because we had 2 staff resignations near the end of the year, and Sylvia is really very uniquely qualified to cover a lot of ground. So she's been helping us out with that process, and she'll be around to help us with a full range of topics in PPE as Sandra picks up the reins and really develops some strategic decisions for staffing in the office and moving forward in this new era that we find ourselves in. Otherwise, State Committee on Transfer has been, Paul Smith has been working with that group on the various transfer-related initiatives that we've got going. Ashley Lockhart has been convening the Sexual Violence Advisory Committee and attending government relations conference by virtual mode. Beverly Rebar has been once again ably leading Chev's efforts in the General Assembly and working with the Governor's Vaccine Advisory Work Group. And otherwise, everyone's just been doing their jobs as usual. And that's the end of my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Joe. And as always, we thank you and your staff for all the work you guys do and finding ways to continue to be productive during these virtual times we find ourselves in. So thank you guys for all the hard work.
Thank you.
And unless council members have something else, we will be adjourned, and you have 25 minutes back. Maybe a little bit more.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
See you in the morning. All right, guys. Bye.
Take care. Thank you all very much.
Goodbye.
Bye.